Commonwealth is pleased to welcome you to the third Global Biennial Conference on Small States. My name is Deodat Maharaj, Deputy Secretary General of the Commonwealth, and I'm the facilitator for this opening session. We have gathered here in this, the International Year of SIDS, to focus our attention on resilience building in small states. In addition to refining our understanding of the challenges that small states face, we want to use this opportunity to identify concrete proposals for meeting those challenges. This event has been designed to be both informative and innovative. We encourage you to engage with the material being presented and join the debate and discussion, both in the room and on the Commonwealth Connects workspace you have been invited to join when you registered. You can also continue the discussion on Facebook and Twitter using the hashtag #CWSmallStates. As you will have noted, the agenda for the next 2 days has carefully selected presentations and panel discussions on several aspects of resilience building in small states. With this in mind, I would like to invite His Excellency, Mr. Kamalesh Sharma, Secretary General of the Commonwealth, to start the conference by making the official welcoming remarks on behalf of the Commonwealth Secretariat. Secretary General.
It's a very great pleasure to greet you and bid you welcome in co-hosting this conference with the Government of St. Lucia, for whose generosity we are most grateful. The Commonwealth Secretariat continues its long-standing role of convening and advocacy to advance the interests of small states. The Commonwealth Charter, adopted by our heads of government on behalf of the people of the Commonwealth, affirms this. It states, "We are committed to assisting small and developing states in the Commonwealth, including the particular needs of small island developing states in tackling their economic, energy, climate change, and security challenges, and in building their resilience for the future." Building resilience is the theme for this conference and is a primary Commonwealth focus. Inclusivity is another. That is why, in the Commonwealth's global advocacy role, with groupings such as G20, we seek to be a voice expressing the concerns of those who do not have a seat at the table. This conference carries forward that work and seeks to broaden it and deepen it. We are gratified to have with us officials from so many small states and such excellent representation from bilateral, multilateral, and regional organizations and partners. Such participation will inform, energize, and greatly enrich both the deliberations and the outcomes of our gathering. You are all most warmly welcome. It is fitting that this third global biennial conference should be taking place now in what has been designated as the International Year for Small Islands Developing States. And as we move towards the UN Third International Conference on Small Island Developing States in Samoa in September. Of course, not all small states are island states, nor, as the word global in the conference title indicates, are all participants Commonwealth member states. We have long sought to convert our knowledge and wisdom and practical work into global contributions with global relevance. Today, what we share is also an awareness of meeting at an important juncture. The target date for the MDGs will soon be upon us, and so it is time to take stock of progress made and lessons learned. For the future, the international community is looking to shape the post-2015 development agenda. We must ensure that these and other global processes, as well as international systems and institutions are more responsive to the needs of small and vulnerable states. The Commonwealth Secretariat, for its part, is in the first of a 4-year strategic plan which charges us to strengthen the capacity of our smaller member states to withstand stresses and overcome vulnerabilities. My colleagues who will meet you here over the next few days are responsible for a spectrum of development policy conceptualization, analysis, research, piloting ideas, consensus building, and advocacy. The conference is an occasion where the threads are carefully examined and drawn together. We hope these 2 days will provide a forum for sharing best practices and experiences and lead to agreement on specific areas of concern where stronger advocacy and greater practical support can be advanced. Growth is one of these areas of concern. Small states are disproportionately affected by frequent and prolonged economic and weather-related shocks. They are beset by challenges when seeking to accelerate economic growth and improve development outcomes. Limited ability to withstand or rebound from adverse shocks causes extended periods of economic downturn. The aftermath of such stresses can also result in the erosion of hard-won social goals and gains. Even for those small states that enjoy relatively high per capita GDP and give the impression of being economically robust, the reality is that they are fragile, disproportionately affected by external shocks and lack resilience. All of this together has adversely affected the level of support offered by the international community to these countries. Another concern is the Millennium Development Goals, where small states continue to lag behind. Our Commonwealth publication, The Big Divide, a 10-year report of small islands, developing states, and the Millennium Development Goals, shows that small states, especially microstates, have made limited progress as compared to larger states. It shows that there is a dearth of data and statistics and demonstrates the challenges for small states in reporting on many of the 50 or so indicators across the 8 goals. Another core concern is debt. And I acknowledge with deep appreciation the participation of the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas, who has spearheaded a high-level advocacy and who is with us today. Many small states are now reporting high and unsustainable debt ratios. This situation has been precipitated by factors such as the waning of concessional finance since the early 1990s, the successive environmental and economic shocks, including oil and food price crisis in 2007 and 2008, and the global financial and economic crisis of the following year. Despite debt restructuring by highly indebted small states, most continue to face high and unsustainable debt burdens. This indicates that existing mechanisms are incapable of delivering the relief necessary if small states are to service borrowing. Spiraling debt burdens smother growth and severely impair development. Tackling the structural causes of such persistent impediments is paramount. The constraint of human capacity is an abiding one. Strong institutions are important if small states are to build resilience, but high overheads make local institutional structures inherently more expensive per capita. Lack of specialist expertise compounds the problem. These sorts of constraints affect development and growth, and at the practical level, limit the ability of small states to engage effectively in multilateral processes on issues affecting them. I would draw attention here to the contribution made by our Commonwealth small states offices in the multilateral hubs of New York and Geneva. They provide subsidized office space to enable the diplomatic missions of Commonwealth small states to engage fully with the United Nations and other multilateral agencies and participate in international decision-making processes. In addition, the Commonwealth office in Geneva also provides office space as outposts for small state intergovernmental regional organizations. The office also has resident trade and human rights experts to provide technical assistance in those fields for the tenants and visiting small states delegations, requiring support in their multilateral engagement in organizations based in Geneva. Distinguished guests, I mentioned the theme of this meeting, building resilience in small states. We are grateful for the work of the technical working group, which was constituted to re-examine both the resilience framework developed by the Commonwealth and the wider body of related knowledge of overcoming vulnerability with a view to determining what further work is needed to improve and strengthen the framework. The group concluded that attention needs to be paid to implementing good policy practices in several areas. These include macroeconomic stability, microeconomic market efficiency, good governance, social development and cohesion, and sound environmental management. Of these and other priorities, this conference will, I feel sure, identify practical and evidence-based policy options that will provide whatever may be lacking in existing resilience frameworks, raise the effectiveness of advocacy, and lift provision of technical assistance and capacity building for small states. Let me turn now briefly to the very successful meeting which took place yesterday of the Commonwealth Open-Ended Ministerial Working Group on Small States. The working group was mandated by Commonwealth heads of government at their meeting in Sri Lanka last year to progress practical and concrete proposals. Those are the exact words. Practical and concrete proposals to address the priority development concerns of Commonwealth small states, including through the third International Conference on Small Island Developing States in 2014 and development of the post-2015 development agenda. Following last year's CHOGM or Commonwealth Summit, this decision was made. A small, regionally represented core group, an open-ended one, of Commonwealth ministers was formed to take forward the leaders' initiative. Yesterday's meeting was chaired by the Honorable Minister Jean-Paul Adam, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Seychelles, and was attended by ministers and senior officials representing Jamaica, Maldives, Malta, Lesotho, Samoa, Sri Lanka, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, and Namibia. Minister Jean-Paul Adam may be able to highlight the key priorities identified during the course of today. The priorities identified include a focus on resilience, financing for development, including addressing the debt challenges of small states and promoting instruments which reduce the impact of shocks, climate change and climate financing, ocean governance, energy security, institutions and capacity building, wider governance concerns of small states, and multilateral trade policies that improve access by small states to global and regional trade markets. Many of these issues will, of course, be taken up further during the course of the discussion in the next 2 days and will be subject of advocacy by the working group going forward. We in the Commonwealth are deeply conscious that continued progress depends upon strategic orientation and well-chosen partnerships. We are therefore committed to working closely with others to ensure that through collaborative partnership and coordinated activity, the necessary attention is accorded to the priorities of small states. We wish you all well in the deliberations ahead. Thank you.
This morning, the unsurpassed honor and pleasure is mine to welcome you to St. Lucia and to this landmark Third Commonwealth Small States Conference. The theme for the conference, Building Resilience in Small States, is very timely and appropriate. And as you experience the beauty and tranquility of our island paradise, many of our people in Dominica, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines are still struggling to put their lives back together after the 2013 Christmas Eve trough, which of course brought devastating floods, landslides, and untold damage to roads, bridges, housing, and household property, agriculture, fisheries, and tourism. The effects of this simple and seemingly benign rain event has brought into sharp focus, in a very real and graphic sense, the fragility and vulnerability of small island developing states like ours. It has also shocked us into reality with the magnitude and scale of the damage that an otherwise insignificant event can have on lives and livelihoods in our countries. Whereas previously, we were preoccupied with hurricanes and tropical storms, in the last decade, we have had to contend with floods, sea level rise, coastal degradation, earthquakes, tsunami risk, and the detrimental effects on agriculture, fishing, and tourism caused by global temperature rise, otherwise known as global warming. As the guardians of our respective national assets, we cannot speak about development if we do not consider sustainability and protecting our patrimony for succeeding generations. Less than 20 years ago, some of the most powerful nations on the planet were trying to dodge the warnings about climate change because they felt it was a problem of poor countries. But today, as the devastation of climate change continues its decimating march across Europe, North America, and other parts of the globe, the inescapable reality seems to be finally hitting home. So America has acknowledged that colder winters are not a climatic accident. Russia has accepted its warmer winter as a phenomenon of climate change, and Europe has recognized its wetter rains as climate change in action. All over the world, lives are being lost, and livelihoods are being threatened and destroyed by adverse climatic events of increasing intensity and severity. No country, rich or poor, is immune, and so we have a responsibility as a world body to tackle the problem as a collective for the benefit of all peoples of the world. Small island developing state seeds like ours are more vulnerable and susceptible to the effects of adverse climate events, and therefore the world must take due cognizance of our need to build resilience. There must be a recognition, especially among the richer nations, that regardless of our GDP status, we are resource poor and in need of financial resources to undertake resilience building work, whether in the areas of infrastructure, agricultural investment, social protection, or economic transformation. The impact of a single event on a small state can be catastrophic, while in a large state, the same event would have sometimes an insignificant effect in comparison. It is therefore incumbent upon the Commonwealth and other international organizations to consider the situation facing small island developing states as critical to our mandates and central to our activities. We must be committed to the sustainable development of seeds, and we must participate meaningfully in the global debate and program to address seeds issues. Our approach must be integrated and it must be inclusive. It cannot be only about what governments and technical experts believe. It must take on board the relevant concerns, experience, and advice of indigenous peoples, civil society organizations, the private sector, and regional and international organizations. Such an approach is infinitely more sensible in the context of the upcoming Samoa Global Seeds Conference, which has as its theme the sustainable development of small island developing states through genuine and durable partnerships. So our Commonwealth Conference on small states held this week must feed into the global dialogue, the global strategy, and the global action plan on sustainable development. And to do so, it must abandon old myths and focus on the current realities confronting seeds. We must be prepared to pursue new pathways to progress, promote new partnerships for development, and forge new friendships in our fight to secure a better future for the next generation. We need to consider how we maneuver within the United Nations and how we engage with the Global Environment Facility and other established financing mechanisms, while convincing international financial institutions that as a matter of immediate importance, they need to invest in interventions that tackle climate change and biodiversity issues. As part of the SEEDS Global Network, we in St. Lucia and the Caribbean feel very strongly that the issues confronting us of climate change, sustainable energy, and disaster risk reduction are inextricably connected. We also believe that democratic governance, debt sustainability, and youth empowerment are critical to our development. However, our fragile economies and ecosystems make us very vulnerable to disasters, which can affect the entire socioeconomic fabric of our small societies. It is therefore important that we have the support and commitment of the international community in our efforts at sustainable development. As I prepare to conclude, I would like to again welcome you to this meeting and urge that all work to have a frank and fruitful deliberations and emerge with objective outcomes. I thank you and welcome again to the beautiful island of St. Lucia.
I am delighted to be here with you this morning as we come together to collectively build upon past effort and to advance the position and strength of small states on the global playing field. As we say in the Caribbean, everyone must put their 2 cents. However, as we have realized in this region, the size of the island you come from bears no correlation to how much you are likely to say. There is often an inverse relationship. The smaller you are, the longer you are likely to talk. So I thought I should warn you to settle down. As you would have been told, it is the year of the 20th anniversary of the Barbados UN Conference on Small Island Developing States. It is also the year that small island developing states and the development community will again meet in one of the remotest capital cities of the world, in Apia, Samoa, for the United Nations Third International Conference on Small Island Developing States. As a key partner in the movement for promoting the peculiarities of small states, the Commonwealth has been at the forefront. It has seen it fitting to move its own dialogue to St. Lucia for its third biennial conference on small states. We welcome you with open arms to this pioneering, prodigious island of debate, of dialogue, of poetry and theater, to this island of Nobel laureates, to this island of Derek Walcott and Arthur Lewis, to this island of warmth and beauty. Deputy Secretary General Mr. Maharaj mentioned to me that this conference has been oversubscribed. That is wonderful news. I can see the evidence before me. Our tourism industry needs those numbers. I trust we are all comfortable. I concur with him that this shows a great deal of commitment and interest by many international organizations who are working more earnestly with small states. But I think this also attests to the beauty, the warmth, and the hospitality of small states like St. Lucia, that you can feel at home here. Sometimes one never thinks you could capture so much beauty in such a small space. Yesterday, when I met His Excellency Secretary General Sharma, I teased him that the Commonwealth decided to come to one of its edges, to one of its remote outposts to host this conference. And he immediately and brilliantly retorted, Prime Minister, the Commonwealth has no periphery. Its center is wherever it meets, unquote. And so today, Secretary General, St. Lucia is pleased to be at the center. St. Lucia, like a state of any size, large or small, aspires for the best for its people. We believe fully that size need not matter in the intensity of intellect, of beauty, and of passion of people and countries. However, without the assistance and advocacy of the Commonwealth, such ideals for states such as ours may not be as easily realized. Within this Commonwealth, small states can believe that they are truly being listened to and that their message is being amplified towards the larger regions and blocks of the world. If there is any justification for the existence of the Commonwealth, the work of the Commonwealth for small states justifies that existence. And so we small states and the SIDS must salute the Commonwealth for its hard and continuing work as it engages in advocacy and networking for and on behalf of all small states, even those that are not its members. As you well know, the Caribbean, in all its varied geopolitical senses, is home to most of the small states of the Western Hemisphere, from the Bahamas in the north to Suriname in the south, from Belize in the west to Barbados in the east. And with an English-speaking population of about 5.5 million residents and a total estimated population of 17 million, the Caribbean community, or CARICOM's language antenna, has been all about the reality of small states' development through integration. We are glad to find consonance and the courage to speak through the Commonwealth. And so we are here today to broaden this global partnership as the world recognizes 2014 as the International Year of Small Island Developing States. Therefore, as we move towards Samoa and to the UN General Assembly this year, every day must count. From now on, every day must be a day of advocacy, a day of speaking up, a day of championing our causes to all who will hear us. Some think that because we are small, we are unavoidable irritants. Unfortunate as this view may be, we need to remain focused in our efforts to help the world to better understand us. Ladies and gentlemen, we have entered an e-era, a digital world, an entangled world. The physical impediments of distance between our populations are overcome by the wonders of modern-day transport and communications, and we need to remain connected. In this process of globalization, there is neither pause nor rewind. Moreover, beyond the breakdown of such barriers to trade and movement, political isolation should certainly be seen as anathema to small states. The Caribbean has always been anxious to advance global awareness of the peculiarities of small states. As a political bloc, the Caribbean represents 40% of the voting power in the Latin America and Caribbean region, with just 3% of the population. Our numbers provide us with a major diplomatic resource. Political influence is not summed up by voting power in international fora or regional blocs. There is still great value in international cooperation and in global efforts such as these. However, our history in leveraging such international groupings has not always been of our own making. They tended to be centered by the group to which aid and assistance flows from, and not to the countries which are seeking freedom from cyclic poverty and the challenges of size and geography. For instance, while the European Union uses its existence as the principal modality for its interactions, we have witnessed and sensed a waning of cooperation across the Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific, or the ACP group, in which most small states also reside. Of course, even with this unilateral waning, the EU-ACP partnership persists post-Cotonou with its arrangements of EPAs and its principle of differentiation. Truth be told, the ACP is now a skeleton of its former self. The question is, how much longer will small states have to lobby and persuade international institutions to accept a differentiated approach to aid for small states, to rapid climate change adaptation to respond to what is already a reality for small states, to concessionary financing from international financial institutions that recognizes the benchmark cannot merely be a country's income status determined by per unit economic output or GDP. When such opportunities as this conference provides, it is vital that participants take the time to strengthen their understanding of the issues not just for their region, but for each region and sub-region and each other's peculiar realities. We are fortunate to have in our midst Professor Lino Bruglio of the University of Malta, who was assisted greatly in his research and analysis of the vulnerability and resilience of small states. The development of a resilience framework is an important guide and tool of measurement. It presents an opportunity to characterize empirically the peculiarities of small states and why we require special treatment in both trade and aid. This acceptance that development assistance, whether through soft loans or grants, cannot be purely seen on the basis of GDP per capita has been a long-standing debate. We still have a long way to go to convince the international community. We are observing some very welcome steps by international financial institutions, for example, the World Bank, to become more reactive to natural disasters. Perhaps this is a sign that there is growing acceptance that external shocks to small states are like blows to the head, which leave our development agenda in paralysis, in a coma, and our people in even more dire pains. Indeed, practical national approaches to resilience planning should be welcome and understood in all our capitals. The succinct and guiding premise is that we are less at risk if we have strong policies that increase our resilience and thus reduce the risk of our inherent vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities are a real part of life in the Caribbean and other small island development states in Africa, the Pacific, and the Indian Ocean. Many of you would have, on your drive here, and my minister has eloquently spoken to this issue, from the international airport in the south, witnessed some of the damage brought on by our most recent extreme weather conditions, a seasonal, though unusually intense trough system that severely affected this island, and also St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the south, all on Christmas Eve last year. This was not a hurricane. Every time such events happen, our people begin to believe more in the approaching reality of climate change, even though they do not fully understand its lurking science. Thus, we are but 3 months on from this one event, which came upon us largely unexpected. It led to widespread flooding and losses of just about $100 million US, or nearly 10% of gross domestic product. If only I could be seeing 10% GDP growth this financial year. This event came at the end of a year in which St. Lucia was witnessing record stay-over visitor arrivals. Such is the vulnerability of our economies. While driving along that same route, you would also have seen damages from an early event, that is Hurricane Thomas, which devastated St. Lucia in 2010, leaving losses in the amount of $340 million US. And 4 years on, we are still rebuilding, reinstating retaining walls and bridges on major arterial routes. These two natural shocks represent a combined impact of about 40% of GDP within less than 5 years. You would immediately appreciate the scale of negative impacts that such disasters can have on any small state's finances. And this has been the woe of the Caribbean for many years now. You can turn to Grenada with Hurricane Ivan in September of 2004, where damages were well over $1 billion US, or nearly 200% of GDP. It is reported that over 30% of homes were destroyed. These are singular events. They completely devastate small states such as ours. You can go through nearly all of the islands of the Caribbean, and you will see the impact of such extreme weather events. And they are not limited to extreme weather events. Just this week, St. Lucia's National Emergency Management Office is undertaking a national preparedness simulation for a tsunami event. We have seen the earthquake destruction of Haiti in the year 2010 and the volcanic disaster of Montserrat. We have been warned to expect a big one, an earthquake with immense destructive power. The pledges are often many, the delivery of the promises not so many. What is even more disheartening is the length of time it takes for the response to arrive. The losses mount up in real time, and the cost of small states and their people often can be felt for decades to come. Of course, the implications for public financing and the development agenda have been telling. Islands throughout the Caribbean graduated to middle-income status and then almost en masse were all unceremoniously graduated to high, unsustainable public debt positions, even though in some cases this was largely due to borrowing to meet the cost of reconstruction of natural shocks. The world simply does not understand this logic. Thus, while the Caribbean can boast meeting most of the MDG goals, a post-2015 agenda must focus on ensuring that the population is not left in a quagmire of high indebtedness, high unemployment, particularly among our young people, and low growth. Natural disasters have not been the only adversary on the development path. We must also appreciate that many small states have had to contend with major economic transitions and adjustments. As has been well recorded, in the Windward Islands, our rural economic base was decimated by the changes to the preferential market arrangements under Lomé. And by the turn of this millennium, our farmers had largely abandoned their banana fields. From rapid increases in oil prices, the harsh contraction of the world financial sector in 2008 and the ensuing global economic downturn, many small states have yet to recover. Even while discounting for latency, some even 6 years on, the foreign direct investment inflows remain tremendously tempered in small island developing states, in part due to a long-standing perception that investments in small states is riskier due to the smallness of their markets. All these external shocks characterize the reality of our small states. Certainly, the work by Professor Bruglio in describing our vulnerabilities in small states is worthy of highlighting. The main drivers for vulnerability have been identified as follows. 1, the first is trade openness. That is, we are highly dependent on trade for economic survival. In fact, this phenomenon of globalization also interplays with the issue of ownership of the economic levers as well. 2, then we have the issue of export concentration. we produce a very narrow range of products. In the case of St. Lucia, for instance, it was once bananas. In others, it was sugar. Now it is tourism, or a few eggs all in one basket. 3, also in the mix, is our high dependence on strategic imports, particularly food and fuel. The vast majority of our states simply cannot feed themselves, nor can they survive for any extended period of time without imported energy. And lastly, what I earlier discussed through local and regional example, our susceptibility to natural disasters. I wish to also add a 5th. That is the vulnerability to enter into a state of high cyclic indebtedness. It is likely that the Caribbean as a whole is one of the most indebted regions in the world. While you may argue that this may well be a consequence of the others and is a symptom rather than a cause, it can be seen as a secondary vulnerability in itself because our small states are almost always bound to be indebted, given our relatively low accumulation of reserves or balance of trade. The answer, we are told, is developing resilient countries that can handle shocks. But shocks of what size and what form and type is a question. Is it truly feasible for countries such as ours to ever be able to be resilient enough to face calamities in the order of tens of percentage points of annual economic output? One of the central drivers of resilience is the issue of maintaining a reasonable debt to GDP ratio, simply because a country needs space to borrow so that it might respond to some external shock. Even the United Kingdom government, in its recently announced budget, sought to identify the need for debt to be kept to within reasonable limits so that a shock the size of 10% of GDP over a decade could be handled. How then, on the other hand, do small states handle shocks on the order of 30 and 40% within half a decade? Can such resilience be seen without private savings, sovereign reserves, and insurance? How important, then, is the ability to accumulate capital that itself has resilience against depreciation or destruction? The simple point I wish to make is this. The frequency of natural disasters compel us to develop a modicum of financial resilience to be able to cope with the consequences unleashed by disasters. We cannot, on each occasion, run to the World Bank or go cap in hand and beg for assistance from the international community. The frequency will tire them. Few states understand the language of compassion these days. In addition to the now unrolling policy measure of disaster risk reduction through assistance of the World Bank, the region is also investing in the safeguards such as the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, CCRIF, as a consolidated approach to managing the bounce back from natural shocks. While this has indeed been useful to some measure, coverage is perhaps not wide enough. However, beyond ensuring that more widespread eventualities are insured, I would also want to posit, should we also consider expanding the membership and scope of such a facility to become a risk reduction and insurance fund for small states around the world? Could the Commonwealth explore the feasibility of such a measure? Ladies and gentlemen, the advice is that for us to develop resilient countries, our policies must align with core objectives for better political, economic, environmental, and social governance. Strong countries must thus concentrate on the following core areas as a measure of resilience: macroeconomic stability, market flexibility, sound political governance, social development, and environmental protection and management. I have spoken extensively on economic resilience, yet we know social development and environmental management in particular are critically important for small states to maintain any economic gains. For instance, our economies are largely dependent on tourism. Tourism requires particular care for the protection of pristine natural experiences. Likewise, political and economic stability requires equity and inclusion. We can ill afford the high rates of crime that plague our islands. This can only be fought by the empowerment of people and ensuring they can be faithful stewards of their space. Moreover, the realities of climate change must catapult small states to be leaders in climate change adaptation. Because we exist largely as coastal populations threatened by sea level rise, the bleaching of coral reefs, and the desertification of some territories. The economic and environmental imperative is that we commit more forcefully to renewable energy and energy efficiency. I trust this conference will provide a good opportunity to comment and develop further these concepts involved in developing a resilience framework. Key to this will be the discourse on the practical implementation of resilience. In my view, the 3 R's of resilience are building reliability, responsiveness, and redundancy. Reliability is one virtue generally understood by all. We want robust economic, social, and legal systems that work all the time in a timely manner. This encourages business and investment. Responsiveness, too, is critical for good governance. Both the state and the productive sectors need to be responsive to economic variations that are inevitable. This is well covered in the proposed frameworks. Redundancy is, however, the other critical ingredient. While it is generally thought of in a negative sense in common parlance, the concept of redundancy is well understood from an engineering perspective. Redundancy refers to the need for systems to prevail even when the primary ones fail. Sometimes you want duplication, you need alternatives, you need backups and reserves to be resilient. A practical example of not having sufficient redundancy was during Hurricane Thomas in 2010. We lost 2 major bridges connecting our capital, Castries, to its heavily populated northern suburbs of Grosley. In fact, you are right now in Grosley. For days, traffic had to crawl through narrow mountain roads which simply could not cater to the volume of traffic. A practical corollary of redundancy to improve resilience was the decision taken after Hurricane Thomas by our government to purchase Bailey bridges in the event of disasters. During our last disaster 3 months ago, we were able to replace within a week bridges which were lost to raging rivers. Redundancy costs more, but there is a benefit in being prepared and having alternatives. More broadly, while an analysis of policies can tackle the dynamic changes, responses, and snapshots of the present, redundancy refers to the static nature of resilience, which has to be built up over time. The framework you develop should also cater for the accumulation of resources or wealth and the strength of resilience of these resources. Accounting for the wealth accumulation of a country, particularly its infrastructure backbone of things like transport, communications, and other utilities, should be seen as a critical resilience measure. Otherwise, you may have a country which has of late taken all the right decisions but still cannot compare to the resilience of a developed country that has accumulated years of resources. And if I may digress just a little to say to you, beware of the gifts that you receive. Make sure that the gifts that you receive can properly protect you. St. Lucia is replete of instances where we receive gifts of bridges and infrastructure, but bridges that could only last for 30 years. For some reason, many of them don't think we deserve bridges that can last for 100 years. So beware. Therefore, as I draw to an end, participants, I urge that you continue the dialogue on the priority areas out of the Commonwealth's 2012 Small States Conference in Marlborough House. These outcomes highlighted important areas of functional cooperation with common valorization to all participating small states. These included promoting green growth, tourism and inclusive growth, regional integration, migration and development, and a focus on practical ways to build resilience. Your role here today and tomorrow cannot be seen as a theoretical undertaking. It must provide practical clarity in developing robust, defensible solutions for reaching consensus with the developed world. As we head towards Samoa, many of the issues I have raised today have already been on the table since Barbados in 1994, and they were reconfirmed in Mauritius in 2004. Since then, we have seen the rise of new small states such as East Timor, which has been deemed the most oil-dependent country in the world. We have seen the fortunes of some states brought to their knees due to unmanageable debt and low investment. And yes, we also do have country examples in our midst. Successful states who, through sound policies and stable democracy, have achieved great feats as measured by indices such as the UN's Human Development Index and Doing Business reports. The Caribbean and the Eastern Caribbean have achieved many best practice examples of small states integration, and these have been shared with other regions. I believe that we can build on our common experiences and successes, and that these can be replicated with the right actions and policies. Some of these policies must be centered about the right legal and political framework, sustainable travel and tourism development, responsive and competitive trade, business, and investment facilitation, promoting a simplified tax administration, developing resilient transport and communications, and leveraging our greatest asset, our people, through technology, skills development, and technical education. Every vulnerability must have a resilient response. Let these 2 days be put to good use to explore these responses and to set the tone for Samoa and beyond 2015. Let us prepare Commonwealth small states for a more resilient and prosperous future. Let us convince our global partners that we can be contributors to the world with the right type of help. Do enjoy St. Lucia. I thank you and look forward to seeing you in Samoa in September. Thank you very much.